Hello again and welcome to the Dr Hilary Show. Coming up, the man behind two of British TV's most iconic dads, lovable Mick Shipman in Gavin and Stacey and menacing Archie Mitchell in EastEnders. He's also a presenter, author and adventurer, cycling the UK with his son George, uncovering his family history on DNA Journey and surviving the jungle on I'm a Celebrity. I'll be joined, of course, by Larry Lamb. Remember, if you have a medical question that you'd like to put to me, send an email to ask@drhilaryjones.com. First today, a reminder that the best health and wellness advice I can give you is to click our subscribe button on YouTube. Nothing is more important than your health. So do yourself a huge favour, click subscribe now, and in return I'll make sure you receive health tips that you can trust and rely on every week. Telling great stories in every genre, from crime drama to comedy, has been central to the work of my guest this week. Larry Lamb is a veteran actor and broadcaster whose career spans Triangle, Buster, Our Friends in the North and more. And he's still going strong. Welcome, Larry.
Not too strong.
Well, you and I both, but here we are. We're still living and breathing.
Septuagenarians.
How the devil are you?
I'm very good. Very good. Yeah, you know, for an old geezer, like running towards the end of his battery life.
No, you're doing great, and you're still on our screens, giving people so much pleasure. So your characters, you know, Mick Shipman, are so central in Gavin and Stacey. A very popular character. You were a less attractive character, Archie Mitchell in EastEnders. Yeah. You've been on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out Here in 2016, was it?
Yeah, it was. Well done.
Okay, and so many other things besides, you know, radio presenter. Yeah. Which of those things have you preferred, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. It's very difficult to say. You kind of get involved with whatever it is you're doing. You're not sitting around thinking, oh, this is my favourite. It's just the one. It's like Gavin and Stacey has just taken up a large part of my life, and it's what people really know me for. And so I have a great deal to thank to it for what it's done. And it is one of the best jobs I've ever had. But I think some of the jobs earlier on in my career, when I was sort of learning how to be an actor, and that were very formative, they all each at their own particular moment, it probably is your favourite, you know?
Yeah.
It's like when people ask you who's your favourite leading lady.
Yes.
It's like, well, they're all my favourite at the moment, you know?
Absolutely. And of course, you didn't start off going go straight into drama and acting, did you? I think you were, in the oil industry?
Yeah, I finished up in the oil industry and working in North Africa, in Libya, and then I went to America and gradually came out of the oil business into the utility construction world of electric power lines and telephone lines and anti-corrosion systems, and I finished up in Canada, and I'd become a very keen amateur actor. And I got an opportunity to go for an audition for the professional theatre there in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And, I jumped ship. That was it.
And you loved it.
I did. I loved it. And I have to say to people who kind of assume that just because you're a professional actor, you get more out of it because you're getting paid to do it than you did when you were doing it as an amateur. I don't really quite go along with that. I mean, people say to me, oh, well, I really love it. And I think, well, you wouldn't like the life of an actor, but if you like acting, then join a good amateur dramatics group. Yeah, well, you're still going to be doing it.
It's a bonus if you get paid as well for doing something you love, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, it is. But, then there's all the rest of it that goes along with it. Right?
And now you're an author as well. So your first, I know you did an autobiography previously, but now you've got your novel all wrapped up.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, I think really what it boils down to is that I've coming from the outside world and working in, as I say, in construction with crews of guys as it was back then, travelling away and making sure they're all looked after, making sure they're fed and they're lodged and they're transported and everything's there for them. I was used to, in that as being my working environment. So I came into the theatre, gradually worked your way through the theatre and into film and television. And once I started to be away on locations, I realised that, I was working with a crew, so there's real similarities. And then I thought, okay, well, there's somebody on this crew that does a job that I used to do, and they're called the first assistant director. And gradually, years and years into the business, you realise just how important this person is, be they man or woman. The first assistant director is basically the keystone of the entire operation. Total responsibility. The producer gets the money. The director basically supplies the art. And the first assistant director runs it. And so I thought, that would be me. But then I realised that the stress that they operate under is so extraordinary because it all hangs on them. And then what I realised was that there was a story in there to show the real side of that business, which is not all about actors. It's all about a crew. Because if you go to work on it as an actor, you're part of it, but you're there specifically to be filmed, whereas the crew are there to film whatever gets in front of the camera. So that's the reality for me. And I thought it would be interesting to make a film about a film being made, to see really what goes on when something starts changing the direction of everything. And I held on to this idea for years. And then I was having a discussion with an old friend of mine, and I was thinking about doing a follow-up to the autobiography, because that was back in 2010. So there's another whole 15 years, another life, 10 years at the moment I was talking about it. And I kept wondering about, whether I wanted to do that or not again, and figuring, no, next time I want to write an autobiography is when I'm just about to turn 100. And a lot of the people I'd like to write about aren't around anymore.
So what you like then?
Some of the ones that I really do like won't mind if I say anything nasty about them.
Absolutely.
And so this woman that I was talking to, she sort of dared me. She said, surely you can fictionalise some part of this extraordinary life you've had. And whilst I was trying to convince her that I couldn't, it suddenly occurred to me that this story that I'd always thought of as a film, I could write that. And that was it. I said, look, just hang on a minute. I think I'm going to have a little go at this. So I put the phone down and wrote 1,000 words and sent them to her. And she said, that's it. Go on, off you go.
How long did it take you to write it?
I think just about 14 weeks, I think.
Wow, that's fast.
But, it's a total commitment thing with me.
Yeah.
I can't do it with any distractions going on at all. When I wrote the autobiography, I think it took me 12 weeks, right? And that is working every day. Yeah. Every day.
Yeah.
Like usually works out about 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's an old journalist friend of mine, a journalist author now, a very, very accomplished author who's been writing books long after his journalistic career finished. And he phoned me up one day when I was into writing. He said, how are you doing? I said, well, I'm doing really well. I've written 40,000 words. He said, 40,000 words? Are you kidding? I said, yeah, well, I said, look, I'm just doing what you told me to do. And he said, what? I said, well, you said you write 2,000 words a day. No. He said, I told you I do 1,000 words a day. That's what a journalist is trained to do. So that's what I do.
Yeah.
I get up.
Yeah.
And I write my 1,000 words.
But it does focus the mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really does. And as you're writing, you think of other things.
Yeah.
And the characters you've worked with and the people behind the scenes. And I think people are genuinely fascinated. How do you put a film together? What's involved?
Exactly.
There must be all that ego,
it's a business that entertains billions of people around the world. And nobody knows anything about the people that are in it.
Yeah.
And it isn't like they think it is, because they just think of a cinema and actors and all the rest of it. Maybe somebody standing around with a camera or something like that. When you go into work every day, as you'll know from with what you do in TV, the crew of the people that greet you, the crew of the people that look after you, the crew of the people that you're going to see there every working day. The same with you. The guests come in. Well, in the TV and film production thing, really, whilst they are they absolute? They're the reason it's being made. The actors come in and they're the guests of the crew. Yeah. Of the crew of the people that, like carry you, they support you, they're there. And so it was all the beginnings of it. And so I'd been in the 80s in a great big production. It was an international mini-series on the life of Christopher Columbus. And we started off in Malta, then we went to Spain, and then we went to the Dominican Republic. And so this was like a great big gang, 150 technicians and everybody else on the road with a bunch of actors. And that there made me get the feeling of like what, a thing going to the Caribbean, in this case, Dominican Republic. And what I didn't know at the time, and we didn't realize until the end, was that there was something bubbling away in that country at that time.
Politically.
And so when they were about to load us all into vans to drive us 8 hours across muddy roads back to the capital to get on the plane, they realised it was too risky. So they had to get small planes to fly us out in 4s and 5s directly to the international airport and then put you on a plane and fly you out. So that was the basis of the story. It was about a crew of people, of working people going to the Caribbean to make a film. And when he's in the car being driven to the airport, the first assistant director, the key person, gets a phone call from the producer who's out there on location, and he's telling him basically, this is a nightmare already, and you ain't even at Heathrow yet, right? So
it's not all glory like the BAFTAs, which recently you attended because of the success of Gavin and Stacey, with Ruth Jones getting an award. It's not all about wonderful things. This is about warts and all.
Absolutely, more warts than anything.
Is that right?
In fact, yeah.
Okay. I really look forward to reading it.
It's all character driven. It's all about these people. It's all about people just like everybody else who have a job. Yeah. And their job is to be part of a filmmaking crew, and that's what they do. And sometimes they go to interesting places, sometimes they go to ghastly places, but that's what they do. And it's all about them.
Okay. And unlike some celebrities and personalities, you've chosen to self-publish rather than use a big publisher. Why was that?
Well, when I did the autobiography, it was with a great big brilliant publication company, publicity, a publishing company. And I began to realize that the means by which it was being sold was basically my public profile. And so when it came to I just wrote the book. I didn't go after a publisher and give them an idea and say, I want to write a book. I just wrote the book. Yeah. And so when it came to the whole thing of getting it published, I spoke to several people, and somebody said, well, why don't you just get a small independent publisher to do it for you? And they knew somebody that was part of one. And so I thought, well, let's give it a go. And apart from anything else, when you've spent 50 years in the acting game and, like that, I don't know how many rejection slips you've had in 50 years, quite a few, or, auditions that you've gone and put your heart and soul in and nobody's even bothered to phone up and say, no, he hasn't got it, we've given someone else the job. You begin to kind of reject the rejection syndrome. You know what I mean? I'm thinking, right, do I really want to start dancing around in all that again? Whereas if I get in touch with these people and they want to do it and they like the book and it's up to their standards, then I don't have to worry about rejection. Sure. And that's how I did it.
And you can and you can choose where you go on the book tour. You've got a big book tour coming, and you're starting off in Billericay.
And starting off in Billericay,
on Barry Island.
It's really ironic because in Billericay, There's a place called the Reading Rooms, and the Reading Rooms were built I can't remember the exact date, in the 1800s to encourage working class people to read and to write, right? So there's this establishment there, and I thought of all the places that would be perfect to start a book tour by, a book by a working class guy who's learned to read and write. That will be it. And then I phoned up Marco down in Barry and said to him, look, this is what I'm doing. I don't want to announce the end of the tour because we're just adding as we go. We've got about 10, 12 literary festivals who've kindly invited me along to talk about it. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to link those up with bookshops and go and have talks and readings in bookshops and finish up when we decide when it's going to be, sometime probably October, November. Then I'm just going to phone him up and say, get it all set up, and we're going to have a do in the cafe.
Brilliant.
On the last night.
Brilliant.
And he said, great, I'll make a big lasagna and we'll have a few bottles of wine and we'll just make a party out of it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to reading the novel immensely. And, I wanted to talk about it because I've already bored you with the fact that I've got my third novel coming out called Under Darkening Skies in July. And we obviously both like writing.
Yeah.
And when I told you about it, you were so knowledgeable because mine is the third book in a trilogy, but this one's focused on the production of penicillin, getting ready for World War II.
Yeah.
And you knew so much about
1943.
That was when it was first used. Yes,
when they first, and it was primarily on American servicemen, wasn't out in the Far East.
That's right.
Yeah, because, there were all those huge problems with sepsis and with gangrenous wounds and bugs and everything.
That's right.
Yeah.
More people died from infection rather than the damage inflicted by the wounds themselves. So it was used in the invasion of Malta in 43, but also out there in the Middle East and in Asia. But the production to get enough penicillin made was an enormous task. Yeah. And without the Americans with their fermentation processes, we'd never have achieved more than a teaspoon. No. But the initial trials were fascinating. So that's what my book's about. I was very impressed with your knowledge. But you've got military in your family history, haven't you?
Yeah,
I mean,
your
relatives.
Not that they're a military family.
No, but they were all involved in the war.
They did their time. My great uncle Wally and my grandfather both served, 4 years in the First World War, and so that was, if you were a post-war baby. If there was family around, at times there would be a bit of yarning going on, with granddad and with great uncle, and they'd have a little chat. My great uncle was on the first tanks. Now, my granddad was a sapper. He was on. They were running wires out along the trenches for communications, and then. In the Second World War, my father and one of his brothers were both in the Air Force, and my uncle, was in the Navy, and my mother was in the Land Army in what they called the Timber Corps, and they were cutting pit props up in the forests up in East Anglia.
Wow!
So there were 4 of them all involved in the Second World War.
Yeah. So was this part of your motivation to join the Dad's Army Remembrance sketch on the 80th?
No, it was much more simple than that. They just phoned me up and said, "You interested in doing this?"
But you couldn't resist, I suppose.
Yeah, it was fun to do it. Fun to do something like the BBC are extraordinarily adept at those massive things. It was like a big rock concert,
Yeah, but it was so important to remember, 80 years on,
absolutely.
And try and think about the lessons that we hopefully have learned, but I'm not sure we have.
No, we haven't
80
learned.
years on from conflict.
No. As far as I'm concerned, I wrote a poem about this in 1983 when I was feeling very, very wary about what was going on at the moment in the world. And basically, the poem starts... I wonder if the girls took over, grabbed control before it's too late. Yeah. Grab the bulls by the horns before the bulls crash the gate. right?
Yeah, I
That's
like that.
what I feel.
Yeah.
Just like we've had it for a long time now.
They usually- yeah.
Like let the other lot try
well,
it.
they're the peacemakers.
I fail to see two groups of women armed with Kalashnikovs facing each other when one of them wouldn't shout. Look, why don't we just sort of like have a cup of tea?
Talk it
Maybe
through.
we can talk this
Talk
through.
it through. Yeah, more
But
likely
instead
to
of that,
happen,
it's
isn't it?
boys.
Yeah.
And there's too much. There's testosterone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negativity.
Saber rattling.
There's also rather a bit too much alcohol goes on as well that's involved with all of it,
True.
and that is not a good source of energy.
Let's get on to health.
Let's get on to health.
You are an ambassador for Marie Curie.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Well, interesting. My brother, Wesley, finished his life in a Marie Curie hospice in Newcastle. And he and I had, we'd had a rocky time over the years. We'd kind of drifted apart. We were very close when we were boys, but I finished up there in Newcastle, being with him for the last week of his life. And then Alison Steadman's been really involved with Marie Curie, and somehow or other they put us two together on an event for them. And so I just realised that they'd helped my brother so much, and they'd helped me as well, particularly because I was very reluctant to go, and I thought, I really don't want to start trying to put things right with him, but it was obviously the thing to do. And spending a week with him, his last week, and even though he couldn't speak, chatting to each other, messages and signs, and talking to people on the staff there, and the specialist doctors who really understand what you're going through. It was a very important period of my life that week, and so it did a lot for me to see him through that.
Yeah.
And so since then, I've tried to help out whenever I can.
Oh, that's great. That sounds very reminiscent of the Mike and Mechanic song "In the Living Years." Not leaving it too late.
Yeah.
But make up your differences before you lose.
It was really important to me because it was, I hate to think of what it would feel like now if it had been left the way that it was.
Yes, you made up.
Yeah, we did make up.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So Marie Curie, they do fantastic work. I mean, the nurses that looked after my mum before I lost her at the age of 97, they were just magnificent. They were there, and they do a fantastic job. So, what about your health? Are you
I mean, I've had big problems with my back into my 60s, and into my beginnings of my 70s, all. I was always very active, very sporty, but I got involved with doing up an old house when I was about 40, and just went too crazy at it over the years, and pulled every muscle, wrecked my back, and then it all started to kick off. I think what it was like 2017, there was clearly something going wrong, and I was getting these great bolts of electricity going through my arms and through my legs, and in the end they put me in a scan, and they said, look, you're close to your life finishing up in a wheelchair, because he showed me this one of the C7, I think it is, right at the top.
Seventh cervical vertebra.
Right. Mm-hmm. He said that line you can see on the screen there, that white line, is actually your cord.
Yeah.
And you see where it's disappearing.
The disc has been
pushing. That's a disc is cutting right through it. So we're going to have to sort that out.
Oh, right.
And they did very quickly, fortunately, at the National Hospital there at Queen Square.
So they operated on it.
They did. And he said, we're
going
to cut my throat open. And when this guy used to go to a physio, I said, well, what are they going to do, just lay me on my back? He said, no, they won't lay you on your back. They'll lay you on your front and cut your throat, which seemed a bit bizarre until you understand the logic and the mechanics of it, right?
Yeah.
Because the access to the spine is better from the front than the back, or from the back or whatever, from the inside and the outside, because you've still got the remnants of a kind of a spine, spinal projections there. And so once they'd explained to me, I said, and of course, 2 weeks after I'd had the operation, you could find no trace of that scar on my neck. It was gone completely.
Yeah.
And it was, it was very successful.
Good.
But I remember they did it on a Saturday morning, and on the Monday, I had to go in and have an X-ray just to make sure they could see where all the screws and all the cage and everything else were all in the right way.
Did they fuse the vertebrae?
No, what they did was they pulled the vertebra out.
Yeah.
They got like a mixture of a fibre and some bone, I think it is. And they put that in.
A bone graft.
Then they caged the whole thing so that it's holding that in place because presumably there's elements of the natural thing that link it all into the system, right?
Yes.
So they did all that. So I had to go in there and have this. So I'm chatting to the guy that was like seeing me in to have the X-ray, and he said, "How was the operation?" I said, "Well, all I know is I woke up with a thick lip." And I said, "Well, what was it like from you?" He said, "Well, I was running the screen because they operate via a screen, right? Because they can't get in there to see it." Yeah. So he said, "Well, it was like being in a mechanic's yard. It was like, give me another hammer, bang, bang, bang." I said, "That's where the thick lips come from." Yeah. So, but it was a, absolute huge success. The whole thing worked perfectly.
Good.
And so I was out, but also that almost cutting of that cord, nerve damage,
caught it in time,
and it's like, what is it now? It's 8 years, and it's I've worked my way all the way through my legs, all the nighttime things and all that, legs dancing, and gradually, it's down to the point where my feet are the last bit. It's got to work its way through. Yeah. So it's a long old thing. And then in the meantime, I had the old stenosis. So that was it. The supermarket trolley lean over routine that you see so many people of one's age doing, and then you realise, that can be sorted out. And I was very lucky and got that sorted out. So that's all right. But it's the nerve damage in the feet. Yeah. I swim every day.
I know you do.
I ride my bike.
About the swimming,
and I just try and do exercise every day.
So important. But you swim wherever there's a stretch of water.
Wherever,
So it could be the River Thames?
I love the Thames. Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'd go and swim anywhere. You just don't drink it. That's it. No. And so I, up the River Thames has always been lovely. I love, I love swimming in a river. I love it. And wherever I go, I live swimming in the sea. I've just been in Spain, in San Sebastian, and it's interesting when you come away from there. 3 or 4 days there where I swam morning and afternoon, and then come back to England and go and swim in a pond or a lake or whatever, and the difference is enormous. You really find you've got to haul your body along. The buoyancy that the salt water gives you, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a significant percentage.
It is, yes. That's right.
And so all of a sudden, you're feeling like you're a bit of a dolphin, swiftly running through the water. All of a sudden, there you are, a bit more of a hippo.
But you get a few waves down in San Sebastian, from the Atlantic side.
It was perfect.
Was it?
Perfect. Perfect.
I remember as a kid, my dad took me down to San Sebastian, and we swam into some big waves, and you get pulled under, and that was a lesson to me.
Oh yeah.
And whenever I talk to RNLI, they always remind me that tell people that even strong swimmers can get into difficulty. Yeah. If they don't know the currents, the undertow, and it's still risky.
You've got to be careful.
But you must be a good swimmer now if you're swimming every day.
I mean, I've swum all my life. I was taught to swim properly when I was about 5 years of age. And so I'm probably a little bit too, sort of daring, as it were. Yeah. Once or twice I've been almost caught out, but you just got to use your noodle. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, maybe that's the overconfidence, but as long as you're not going somewhere that is absolutely ridiculously dangerous, which I wouldn't do, and where you're caught in a strong current, you just got to be figuring, look, if this were a boat, there is a way to kind of navigate this, and don't get panicked and just think, all right, well, if I start swimming this way, then I'm little by little I should be able to. But I with the RNLI, I'm sure a lot of what they do is like sorting out people that are overconfident.
And swimming is so good for your body, for your joints particularly.
Absolutely.
It's spinal alignment
because of
is
the
wonderful,
buoyancy, right?
Absolutely, and you're using your joints and the muscles around them without any impact of gravity, without any impact.
Exactly.
So that's a great example. It's a great example. And your health generally, otherwise, other than your joints,
touch wood, good. Do
you live by any rules, diet wise?
Yeah,
supplements?
yeah. I stopped drinking about 15 years ago. And, I'd smoked when I was a boy, but never smoked ever, since then. So those two hazards are gone.
Good.
I a very sensible diet. I have a bit of a binge now and again, but no, I'm a very regular diet, like this. I have the same breakfast every single day. Yeah. And then I eat sort of reasonable. I don't go having great scoffs of stuff. Maybe once a week, And
how often do you have to see your doctor?
I don't know.
No, keep away from doctors. That's my advice. But whatever you're doing, it's working. You look fabulous. And what's next for you, career-wise?
Well, I'm selling the book. That's what's really, and the energy you need to work in a production in acting is so far out of what I would ever have imagined, to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock every morning, to get yourself ready, particularly if you've got your legs and your arms and your back are aching, where everything takes longer, and then you go to work and you've got to work all day long. You may be waiting around, and then at the end of the day they take you home, and you think, I've got to get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. I can't do this. So there's there are nice little jobs that crop up where maybe they need you, for a day here and a day there. And I, like playing the visiting dad or the visiting granddad. That's great. I love that because, as I've explained, my thing is really, as well as the actor colleagues, is the crew. Yeah. Like last year, I did a job in Belfast, I did a job in Newcastle, obviously did a job down in Wales, and I did a job down in the south of England. So you've got 4 different crews there, and the banter is always extraordinary, particularly when you're away in the provinces, and they've got like a Londoner there, in Geordieland, and they're always like, there's a lot of it going on. Yeah. So to me, probably what I'm going to be doing, I've been figuring out that the characters that came to life in this novel, I want to follow them on, because there is another life, and to see, so you've met them in their work situation, and now what I want to do is take them home, because the story ends with the end of that picture, right? And now I want to see what's going on once they get back, because there are 2 or 3 relationships that I've examined in a sort of cursory sort of way, not gone too deep into them. You understand the mechanics of what's going on, and then I want to see what's happening while one of them, for example, has gone home and they've gone straight off on another job, and then another has gone home and somehow or other they're trying to make connections. So it's a follow-up.
Fantastic. Well, I can tell that you're an old school people person. You like relating to people. That's going to be reflected in the novel. I can't wait to read it. I hope they make a film out of it. That must be a hope that you have. Well, you deserve the success.
You never know what's going on.
How do people get hold of the book?
You can get it, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Waterstones, a lot of local books. It's out there.
Fantastic.
And it's just it's there. I haven't done the ebook yet.
No.
So what's the difference? I mean, the audio book. I haven't done the audio book.
Would you read that yourself?
Yeah. Well, I started to do it, and without realizing there are 23 characters in it.
Oh wow!
Right?
Yeah.
So it was a bit tough because of course, you've got about, I suppose, altogether, as well as there being these different characters, there are at least 8 or 9 foreign accents.
Right.
Then you've got London and other parts of the UK accents.
Right.
And what I was doing is reading it, and then as soon as I got to that character, I'd switch the accent. And then you get to a point where that accent is having a conversation with another accent. And in the end, I thought, I can't do this. This is driving me around the bend.
That's why I've got a professional doing that for me.
Exactly.
For my book.
Exactly.
But all the very best of luck with it.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show.
Not at all. Pleasure.
And being so revealing about, your health issues that you've had. And stay safe swimming, won't you? Promise,
I will.
You've got
Don't
lots
worry.
of fun. We don't want to lose you.
No, I don't want to lose me either.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
in for 100.
Absolutely. I'll be there with you. Don't forget, you can watch all my interviews on the Dr. Hilary Show YouTube page, including my recent conversation with Harry Hill.
I worked at Kingston, did orthopaedics, which I didn't know any. Orthopaedics was like a 2-week.
Carpentry.
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks, and you didn't have to pass it to get the exam, I think. So I didn't know. And I remember the first day on the wards, that really scary moment where suddenly you're not just a student without any responsibility.
With all the theories in your head, but no practicality.
Yeah, and I'm pushing that trolley around. All these people have got like broken legs and stuff. And this guy goes, "Oh, Doc," he goes, "how long am I going to have this plaster on?" And I said to him, "Well, what did the last doctor say?" And he said, 6 weeks. I said, "Right, okay." I said, "And how long have you had it on for?" He said, 4 weeks. I said, "Well, probably about 2 weeks."
Once again, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Do it right now. Make sure you watch the next episode, and let's talk about what really matters to you and your health. And for more information and show notes on all our programs, go to drhilaryjones.com.